I understand that the member for Timmins, James Bay, will be leading us in our national anthem today.
Timmins, James Bay.
Oh, Canada, our home.
Ain't nobody want to hear that. I have to mute it so it doesn't get hit with a copyright, so I'll mute it and unmute it here in a moment.
Il sait porter la croix, ton histoire est tout explodé. Our land, glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we
Let the doors be opened, que l'on ouvre les portes. Thank you very much. Déclaration de députés, statements by members. The honourable member from St. John Rothsay.
Earlier this month, our community, the Atlantic region and Canada lost an extraordinary business leader. Irving Oil Chairman Emeritus Arthur L. Irving passed away on May 13th at the age of 93. Arthur Irving was one of Canada's greatest entrepreneurs. Under his leadership, Irving Oil St. John Refinery grew to become the largest in Canada. He led the expansion of the business in northeastern United States and recently Ireland. Today, Irving Oil employs more than 4,000 people, including 2,500 in St. John, and the company has been named one of Canada's top 100 employers for 8 consecutive years. Arthur Irving's legacy spans not just industry, but also conservation and community. He served for 30 years on the board of directors of Ducks Unlimited and has provided transformational support to many healthcare and educational initiatives, as well as community infrastructure throughout the region. His legacy is lasting in his commitment to making Atlantic Canada, Canada in our world, a better place. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Bellechasse-les-Échemins-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, this year Prévost, a flagship business in St. Clair, will be celebrating its 100th anniversary. It all started when Eugène Prévost received an order for wooden coachwork for the 100th anniversary celebrations. And over the years, his hard work and craftsmanship gained great reputation. And the federal government called upon his business in 1943, thanks to this high reputation, in order to fulfill a contract to build buses to move soldiers and war factory workers. Prévost now has more than 1,000 employees who are building buses for municipalities throughout the world, for celebrities, and for political parties during election campaigns. I'd like to congratulate Eugène Prévost on his vision. I'd like to thank all of the artisans who fill us with pride. St. Clair is now celebrating its 200th anniversary, and I'd like to congratulate the company and everyone who works for it, as well as the president of the group, François Tremblay. Thank you.
The honourable member from Ottawa Centre.
Well, thank you, Speaker. Just like you, I'm an avid runner, Speaker, so it brings me great joy today to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Ottawa Race Weekend. Just past weekend, thousands of people participated in the 50th season of the Ottawa Race Weekend, running through this magnificent, beautiful capital city of R on both sides of the Ottawa and Gatineau, on both sides of the Ottawa River. Speaker, this is just not a run, but it's a weekend-long festival of fitness, really encouraging Canadians to be active. People of all abilities are able to participate, even young kids running 1 or 2 kilometer races, not to mention thousands of people running the marathon. It also raises money for important charities. Just last year, over $1 million were raised. I want to thank the staff, all the volunteers, for making Ottawa Race Weekend such a success over the last 50 years. Thank you, Speaker.
The honourable member for Jonquière. Mr. Speaker, today I'd like to tell you about an exceptional 9-year-old. Mademoiselle Gisèle Fortin. For 3 years, she's been spending every Monday night mastering karate. For Gisèle, this is particularly a challenge because she has cerebral palsy that affects her legs, but with the help and support of her parents and her karate instructor, Jean-François Laforge, Gisèle has been overcoming these obstacles. In April, Gisèle participated in the Quebec Open, a major karate competition, and she received the silver medal in the physical challenge category. Despite moments of doubt, Gisèle has embodied perseverance, discipline, and determination. She reminds all of us, as Xavier Dolan said, that everything is possible for those who know how to dream, work hard, and never give up. Congratulations, Gisèle.
L'honorable député de Sherbrooke.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
The honourable member for Sherbrooke. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Canada Economic Development Agency for the Regions of Quebec is investing in our Quebec businesses. Let's see some examples. In Lévis-Lobinière, $1 million for JL Leclerc et Fils for it to improve its productivity and green transition. In Bellechasse-Lévis, $1 million for Plate 2000 so that it can grow while reducing its ecological impact. In Mégantic-l'Érable, $2 million to help Fruits d'Or to increase cranberry and blueberry production in Quebec, and $1.5 million to Diffusion Saguenay and Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord for a new immersive show. Unlike the Conservatives, we are supporting businesses in our regions. The Conservatives want to bring back austerity. Quebec Conservatives should honestly tell their businesses that they want to cut their financial support. We will create new jobs and grow the Quebec economy.
The honourable member from Calgary-Nose Hill.
Many people talk about toxic masculinity, but fewer celebrate the type of masculinity that lifts our nation up. We should recognize men who day in and day out, without selfish motivation, go to work to be independent and contribute financially to their families. Men who do the emotional labor of lovingly disciplining their kids, spending time with them, and loving them enough to give them a stable home, no matter what that looks like. Men who are humble in their power, who overcome their weaknesses, and who sacrifice their own desires to support others. Men who defend others from harm. Men who respect women. Men who teach their sons the importance of personal responsibility and earned respect. As we prepare to celebrate Father's Day, to my husband, Jeff, thank you for gifting our children with the greatest gift they could have got, one hell of a dad and role model. And to the rest of the men who are out there who fit this bill, or who are trying hard to get there as they walk through the trials of life, we see you, we give gratitude to you, and happy Father's Day.
The honourable member from Charlottetown.
Mr. Speaker, May is Lupus Awareness Month, and I'm honoured to raise awareness for the 1 in every 1,000 Canadians living with this chronic autoimmune disease. Lupus, sometimes called the disease of 1,000 faces, is characterized by its diverse symptoms which make diagnosing it a complex and lengthy process. Lupus patients struggle with physical and psychological impediments impacting daily activities, employment, and social relationships. Unforeseen costs such as home modifications and medical transport exacerbate financial stress. Access to health care is hindered by long waiting periods for specialists and medication costs. The disease's unpredictability further complicates matters. Often, disability policies don't recognize lupus, leaving patients vulnerable and unsupported. It's for this reason that we must ensure equitable access to health care, treatment, and supports for all Canadians living with lupus. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable député de Notre-Dame-de-Grâce, Westmount.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Millions of children worldwide suffer concussions every year while playing sports, increasing the likelihood of developing mental health problems and chronic traumatic encephalopathy. CTE is a debilitating disease that can cause sleep disorders, mental health issues, and even dementia later in life. Concussion Legacy Foundation Canada's campaign, Stop Hitting Kids in the Head, aims to raise awareness and to reform youth sports to limit the number of head impacts suffered by children before the age of 14. Ils sont à Ottawa aujourd'hui pour sensibiliser la population à ces enjeux. Nous devons protéger l'avenir de nos enfants, non seulement.
We must ensure to keep them in good health and to make our future athletes as good as possible.
Champion Tim Fleiser, for your leadership on this very important issue. Merci.
The honourable member from Hastings, Lennox and Addington.
Experts from almost every single industry and sector across this country have now had the time to read through this Liberal NDP budget spending spree, and they are nearly unified in their condemnation, especially over housing. This past Monday at Human Resources Committee, Conservatives directly asked industry experts how likely is the government to hit its housing targets. Her response was not a chance. Wow. This Prime Minister's refusal to address the housing crisis has real-world consequences. One mother was recently quoted in the media suggesting we're having to choose between paying a bill or getting food, and that can be really hard. It makes things really difficult, and I just don't see any end in sight. Mr. Speaker, there is something this Prime Minister can do. He can allow his caucus a free vote on our common-sense Conservative housing plan that builds homes, not bureaucracy. After 9 years, the only question left is whether this Liberal NDP government prioritizes practical public policy over partisan politics.
The honourable member from Markham Unionville.
Mr. Speaker, it is with immense pride that I rise today to congratulate Markham's own Michelle Lee on qualifying for the 2024 Olympic Games. Michelle Lee is the most successful Canadian female badminton player ever, and her achievements have brought tremendous honour and pride to our community. Her journey from our local community centre to the world stage has been nothing short of inspirational, being the first Canadian to win individual gold medal in women's single. As we celebrate Asian Heritage Month, it is particularly fitting to recognize Michelle Lee, whose heritage and success bring immense pride to Markham and to Canada. Her story is a powerful reminder of the diverse contribution that Canadians of Asian descent make to our nation. Congratulations, Michelle, and best of luck in Paris. We're all cheering for you. Make Canada proud. Yeah.
The honourable member from Coast of Bays, Central, Notre Dame.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. More Atlantic Canadians are hungry and homeless after 9 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister than ever before. Folks back home are spending way too much of their family income just to put food on the table. According to the Salvation Army Insights report, an astounding 87% of Atlantic Canadians are facing food insecurity. That's up by 13% in just 7 months. Last year, the Salvation Army Food Bank in Gander supplied a record 3,742 households. Based on the past 4 months, that number will be close to 5,000 for 2024. According to Salvation Army volunteers, there's a sharp increase in the number of seniors looking for assistance to put food on their tables. Sadly, many of them once donated to the food bank and are now unable to do so, as they barely have enough money to feed themselves. One thing is certain, Mr. Speaker, this NDP Liberal government is out of touch, and Atlantic Canadians are out of food and money.
The honourable member from Cypress Hills, Grasslands.
Mr. Speaker, it gets more and more obvious just how out of touch the NDP Liberal government is. After 9 years of this Prime Minister's high spending and tax hikes, Canadians can barely afford necessities. That doesn't matter to the NDP Liberals, who went ahead with hiking the carbon tax by 23% anyways, and they won't...
I'm sorry to interrupt the honourable member. I'm having difficulty hearing the honourable member's statement. I'm going to ask all members, please, to carry your conversations outside or to keep them a little bit lower. The honourable member from Cypress Hills Grasslands from the top, please.
Mr. Speaker, it gets more and more obvious just how out of touch the NDP Liberal government is. After 9 years of this Prime Minister's high spending and tax hikes, Canadians can barely afford the necessities. And that doesn't matter to the NDP Liberals, who want to hike the carbon tax by 23%, and they want to keep on raising it year after year. Only Conservatives understand that Canadians need a break. With summer approaching, people are trying to make plans to go out and see all the wonderful destinations that we have to offer in Southwest Saskatchewan. Places like the Jean-Louis Laguerre Regional Park in Willowbunch, or the Great Sandhills in Leader, or maybe Harvest Eatery in Shaunavon. That's why this summer we're calling for the removal of the carbon tax, the federal fuel tax, and the GST on gasoline and diesel until Labor Day. An average of 35 cents a litre taken off of gas prices would save Saskatchewan families up to $850 this summer. But even if the NDP Liberals refuse to support this common sense initiative, Canadians can be ensured that after they vote in the carbon tax election, Conservatives will remove the carbon tax for good.
The honourable member from Aurora Oak Ridges, Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 4 women put their names forward to run for the Conservative nomination in my riding of Aurora Oak Ridges and Richmond Hill. And you know what? None of these women made it onto yesterday's ballot, but 2 men did. Really. This example is not the exception. It demonstrates a lack of support for women and women's rights throughout the Conservative Party. And it's just the tip of the iceberg. Recently, we saw the chairperson on the Standing Committee of Status of Women summarily removed by the Conservative leader. Was she too progressive, too strong? And anti-choice caucus members, one who recently shouted that women who get abortions are needing redemption, forgiveness, and God. Truly appalling. And their leader refuses to answer questions or make a commitment to proactively defend access to abortion, instead pointing to a written statement. Not good enough. Canadian women deserve a leader who doesn't just make hollow statements. We need and deserve a leader that proactively supports. Luckily, we have that leader and that party. Thank you to our Prime Minister.
The honourable member from Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
Mr. Speaker, society as a whole benefits when women and gender-diverse people reach parity in roles such as elected officials, policymaking, and in international relations. We know that as policymakers, women prioritize issues that benefit society, including healthcare and education. When women take on roles as political leaders, they shape politics and bring forward often ignored issues like ending gender-based violence and expanding reproductive health. When women hold political power, governments are less likely to go to war and more likely to uphold human rights. Mr. Speaker, it is time for positive change. Women account for only 30% of those elected to Parliament. Today, I call on all members of this House to challenge existing colonial and patriarchal systems and to lift up women and gender-diverse individuals taking on vital roles in politics. When Parliament is representative of our communities, everyone benefits.
The honourable member for Thérèse de Blainville. Mr. Speaker, Sainte-Thérèse will be celebrating its 175th anniversary this year. It is a town of arts and culture. It was founded in 1849 and has always cared deeply about these fields. It has a piano-making factory and quite a number of festivals. It also cares about education and the media. For example, the newspaper Voix des Midi was founded there in 1937. And in 1967, the Sainte-Thérèse Seminary was converted into Lionel Groulx College. Sainte-Thérèse is also proudly represented by many community organizations and local small businesses, which are part of the warp and weft of this community. I would like to congratulate all those who have contributed to Sainte-Thérèse. It is a unique and exceptional place. Happy 175th birthday.
The honourable member from Regina Capel.
The race to replace the Prime Minister is on, and global jet setter Mark Carbon Tax Carney is leading the field. While hardworking families struggle with the cost of living, Carney's been busy cozying up to Liberal Party elites in luxury rooms far away from the everyday struggles of hardworking Canadians. So the Finance Committee has called Carney to testify so he can come clean with Canadians. The ball is now in his court. Will he have the courage to testify, or will he keep campaigning behind closed doors? Canadians have a right to know how much will he increase the Prime Minister's carbon tax, or why he couldn't name 1 cent of inflationary Liberal spending he would cut. Canadians need to know why Carney works for an investment firm that has $20 billion invested in the PRC. Is it because he can make bigger profits thanks to Beijing's lack of environmental and labor standards? Carbon Tax Carney attacks Canada's oil and gas sector when he needs to earn a vote, but his company invests billions in oil and gas projects in other countries when he needs to earn a buck. All this to say, if the next Liberal leader wants to campaign for the job, the least he can do is come clean with Canadians and show up and testify.
The honourable member from Sault Ste. Marie.
Speaker, it's Steel Day on the Hill, and I'd like to welcome all those who have come to Ottawa today to support this very important industry. I was born and raised in this steel town, and that's why I'm so proud that this government has consistently stood with steel workers in the steel industry. When I was first elected, the Algoma Steel was in bankruptcy protection. Tenaris Tubes had a handful of people working there, and the blame was squarely laid at the former government's feet for inaction on cheap dump steel. We turned things around. We introduced a new trade regime that has strengthened our steel industry from 2016 on. In 2024, in this year's budget, we've also announced the Border Services' new Market Watch Unit to monitor unfair trade practices, increasing trade transparency, and helping the Canadian steel industry remain one of the best. In 2018, when Donald Trump put 232 tariffs on, we stood strong. We will always have the steel industry's workers' backs. Thank you very much.
Oral questions. Questions orales. L'honorable.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister had a revelation. In an interview with the Halifax Chronicle Herald, he said that when people ask him for even more money from the government, he simply answers, and I quote, "The second they do so, inflation goes up by the same amount." Wow. Why had I not thought of that in the past? Spending too much money causes inflation. Incredible. Will he unveil even more revelations and say that budgets do not simply balance themselves? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the problem with the Leader of the Opposition is that he didn't listen to the rest of the sentence in the interview. That explains that we decided to invest in services, invest in support for Canadians, service that will help, like dental care. 2 million seniors have signed up to dental care. Over 100,000 have already obtained, since the 1st of May, dental care. Over 10,000 dentists have already registered and signed up, but the Conservative Party continues to be against dental care and to discourage dentists from registering. We are here to help Canadians. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Now, I understand the Prime Minister's logic. It causes inflation if the government spends money by directly sending checks to Canadians. But if they send it to fund red tape, it doesn't cause bureaucracy, apparently, Mr. Speaker, unless it comes with shattered promises and unrendered services, Mr. Speaker. It's true what the Prime Minister said. Finally, spending money that we don't have adds to the inflationary fire. Will he finally recognise that it's time for a common-sense plan, dollar-for-dollar approach to repair the budget and reduce inflation? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Conservative Party voted against dental care in the name of inflation. They also voted against dental care for vulnerable people that haven't, for some of them, who haven't gone to the dentist for sometimes decades. Is that inflation? No, it's not. It's help for Canadians that are finding it very hard to pay for groceries, for example, who are concerned with the cost of living. We are sending direct aid, and the Conservatives are blocking it as much as possible. That's what it means to be here for Canadians.
Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has had a revelation. In an interview with the Halifax Chronicle Herald, he told how he responded to people asking for him to spend even more government money. And he said, and I quote, "As soon as you do that, inflation goes up by exactly the same amount." Oh. Right? Oh. Right. Why didn't I think of that? Oh, goodness. Spending money you don't have actually causes inflation. If he's in the middle of having epiphanies, has he also realized that budgets don't balance themselves?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative Party has been using that approach about concerns on inflation to stand against things like national food programs for kids or dental care for seniors. They have stood and objected against and even campaigned against dental care for seniors over the past many months. But we've delivered to over 100,000 seniors of the 2 million who've already registered for dental care the support that they hadn't gotten in years or even decades. But he stands against it with some made-up excuse around inflation when delivering services delivers for Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He calls his own words a made-up excuse, Mr. Speaker. You can't make this stuff up. He said that when people ask him, can you send us more benefits or send us an extra $1,000 a month? Well, he responds, as soon as you do that, inflation goes up by exactly the same amount.
Oh, boy.
Right?
Right. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, that is exactly why over the past years we've been focused on bringing down inflation by supporting Canadians, and it is working. For the past 4 months, Mr. Speaker, inflation has been down in the Bank of Canada target range, while we continue to increase supports for Canadians, increase dental care for Canadians with Conservatives that campaigned against, supports for seniors, supports for young people, increased investments in childcare, bringing childcare fees down to $10 a day. These are the investments we're making that do not add to inflation, but add to Canadians' well-beings as they're making ends meet. That's what we stand for, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, he finally, for once, thought about monetary policy. He said as soon as you spend more, inflation goes up by exactly the same amount. Right. And he is right for once. But repeating the same costly promises that he has already broken does not change that fundamental monetary rule. So will the Prime Minister acknowledge that, yes, the economy is about numbers, that people pay their rent in numbers, their gas in numbers, their groceries in numbers, and that the numbers are too high?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Fundamental difference in perspective between the Conservatives and this Liberal government. The macroeconomic situation of Canada is one of the best in the G7, one of the best in the world. And the independent credit rating agencies continue to give us AAA scores. The federal government is doing well, but Canadians need support. So we are choosing to deliver supports to Canadians with this solid fiscal position. Dental care, a national food policy, national disability benefits, help for housing and investments in the kind of supports for Canadians that he has stood against every step of the way, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, in order to put an end to the terrible violence in the Gaza Strip, will the government and the Prime Minister reiterate Canada's commitment to calling for a ceasefire and a food and humanitarian convoy to Gaza? But will it also support the Arab League in its creation of an international peacekeeping force that would be deployed in occupied Palestine until the creation of a functional Palestinian state? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Yes, Mr. Speaker, we are very concerned about the violence happening in Gaza through the devastating actions of the Israeli army in Rafah, for example. As we have done since December, we continue to call for a ceasefire. We're asking that there be a significant increase in humanitarian assistance to the people of Gaza, and we're working with our partners and allies and friends in the region to establish a process through towards a two-state solution with a safe and recognized Palestinian state. Yes, we're working in that direction, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister doesn't have to say yes or that he agrees. I would like to ask him a question nonetheless. Does he recognize that short-term peace or sustainable peace in Gaza will require the intervention of an international peacekeeping force, so that there is a wall between the terrorists of Hamas and the Israeli government? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, for months now we have worked with our G7 allies and other democracies in the world. We have also been working with partners in the region, the government of Egypt, the government of Jordan, and other countries with which we are working in order to try and find a solution, a way to be back on track towards a two-state solution that would be approved, that were rejected by Hamas and Netanyahu. We have to continue to work towards a two-state solution as rapidly as possible, and we'll continue to do that work in this direction because it's necessary to do so.
The honourable member from Burnaby South.
The women and children killed in Rafah cannot be forgotten. We can't look away. And while the leader of the Conservative Party is a cheerleader for the brutal Netanyahu government, this Prime Minister is offering little more than thoughts and prayer. He can take action right now. He could impose a two-way arms embargo. He could sanction Netanyahu's war cabinet. So will the Prime Minister take concrete action today, or will he keep on walking away?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are horrified by the civilian deaths caused by the Israeli strikes in Rafah. We need to see an end to the violence, to the humanitarian tragedy ongoing, which is why we are continuing to put pressure on the Israeli government to cease its military operations in Rafah, why we're calling for more humanitarian aid to get in, why we've been calling for a ceasefire since December, Mr. Speaker, including in votes at the UN, and we will continue to. We need to see more humanitarian aid in. We need to see hostages released. We need to see an end to this violence and a path towards a two-state solution once again.
I would just like to ask all members to not take the floor when they have not been recognised by the Speaker. The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Embargo now.
Yes, the Prime Minister said he was horrified by Netanyahu's strike on Rafah. But when asked what he intended to do about it, he ran away. What he could do today is impose an arms embargo and sanction Netanyahu's war cabinet. Will this Prime Minister finally act to save lives, or will he simply continue to save himself? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, from the very beginning, we have worked actively to promote and establish peace and humanitarian aid. We are in amongst the biggest per capita donors to UNRWA, and we will continue to be here to help through humanitarian assistance, through medical help, and through food aid. And we will do the work that is necessary to continue down a path towards a two-state solution, despite the efforts of the Netanyahu government in ruining every prospect of a two-state solution. We will continue to be here. We will continue to find peace.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Because of this Prime Minister's incompetence and the incompetence of the Liberal Mayor of Montreal, the time one has to wait for a building permit has doubled and rents have tripled. In Ville-Marie, the Mayor of Montreal's municipal riding, it takes 540 days to get a building permit. What is the Prime Minister doing? He simply gives her $95 million more to build bureaucracy and red tape. Why not impose financial penalties on municipal politicians who are hindering the construction of housing? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, instead of targeting elected officials, as the Leader of the Opposition is doing, we are choosing to invest to reduce bureaucracy and red tape, to accelerate processes. And that is exactly what we are doing through our 179 agreements to accelerate housing that we've signed with municipalities from coast to coast to coast. This to deliver more housing more quickly. These are agreements that the Leader of the Opposition wants to simply cancel, and that will not help building faster housing, and that's not what we saw when he was Minister for Housing. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Housing cost half of what it does now. The Prime Minister not only doubled the cost of housing, he also disperses amounts to build more red tape that blocks construction. I have a common sense plan in Bill C-356 that will be voted upon this afternoon, that will cut taxes on construction, that will sell federal land and buildings to build housing, and that will also give significant bonuses to municipalities who streamline housing more rapidly. Will they vote for more housing? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we have a concrete approach. We work hand in hand with municipalities and provinces. We invest in building more housing in the most comprehensive and ambitious way. Contrary to this member, when he was Minister for Housing under the Harper government, he built 6 affordable housing units for Canadians, and that's not the kind of approach that will help. The plan that he's proposed is very, very weak, according to experts that have analysed it. We have a concrete plan, and he refuses to invest to help Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
When I was a minister, we built close to 200,000 housing and apartment units. The average rent was $973, half of what it is today. He works in partnership with municipal officials to double the cost of building a house. My common sense approach will increase housing, will give a bonus to municipalities that go beyond an increase of 15% in building houses. If not, they'll be penalised. Why should we not pay for results? Are they going to pay for more bureaucracy or for more results? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we are undertaking efforts to put an end to the housing crisis through an achievable and ambitious plan. Now let us talk about experts. They said that his bill was a very flaccid approach to housing with many loopholes. That's why the opposition leader did not want to have a debate on his non-plan. He doesn't want to debate it because he lost 800,000 apartment units when he was Minister for Housing, and he only built 6 affordable housing units. I would like to ask all members to please not take the floor when I have not been recognised by the Speaker. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
When I was Housing Minister, we built almost 200,000 houses and apartments, with the average rent being $973 for a one-bedroom apartment. But this Prime Minister is not worth the cost of housing, which has doubled 9 years after he and the NDP took power. What is he doing about it? He's giving $500 million to the Mayor of Toronto, who has just jacked up home building taxes by 20%. Why does he reward local government gatekeepers that block the homes that Canadians need?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are leading on the efforts to solve this housing crisis with a plan that is ambitious and concrete. Meanwhile, after having his housing bill panned by experts as being, quote, exceptionally weak response to the housing crisis riddled with loopholes, the Conservative leader chose to repeatedly delay debate in this House since October on his bill. That's because he just doesn't care. When he was minister, he lost 800,000 affordable apartments and only built 6 affordable homes.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Actually, the number is closer to 200,000, but the Prime Minister has never been very good with numbers, right? So the Prime Minister cites the government-funded bureaucrats and liberal academics to bolster his approach, which has doubled housing costs in just 9 years. partly because he gives money to municipalities and politicians like Winnipeg, where they just blocked 2,000 homes right next to a government-funded transit station built for those homes. Why won't he accept my common sense plan to give bonuses to those municipalities that permit more building and penalties to those that stand in the way?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we criticize rightly the Leader of the Opposition, who, when he was housing minister, only built 6 affordable homes for Canadians across the country. But it is understandable, Mr. Speaker, because he was part of a government that took the federal government out of the building of affordable housing. They chose that the federal government had nothing to do with housing across the country. That's why for 10 years of non-involvement of the federal government, that leaves echoes. We've stepped up and invested in communities, invested in partnerships. We're getting the homes built. We're delivering for Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Sure. Housing costs have doubled since he became Prime Minister. They were half when I was housing minister. Housing costs have gone up 40% faster than wages, a bigger gap than in any other G7 country. Why? Because he's building bureaucracy and not homes. Why won't he accept my common sense plan to require municipalities permit 15% more building, sell off 6,000 federal buildings to build homes, and cut taxes so builders can build?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, just like when he was housing minister, his solution is to do less to help Canadians, to invest less in supporting municipalities as they build housing, to get out of the way and leave Canadians to fend for themselves. That is his political philosophy. It is a political philosophy. It's just not the one that supports Canadians. It's not the one that is delivering for Canadians as we step up with the most ambitious and achievable housing plan this country has ever seen. We will continue to be there to invest in housing accelerators. We will be there to continue to take the GST off of purpose-built apartments. We will be there for Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Belley-Chambly. In mid-March, the NDP had a motion adopted in support of Palestine. It was a rather balanced one, and the Liberals decided not to recognise the Palestinian state through it. Today, while supporting a two-state solution, like the Prime Minister has just said, is he ready to add his country's voice to other countries that officially recognise a Palestinian state? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, it is very urgent to establish a credible path towards long-term peace, and so we are against the Netanyahu government's efforts to reject a two-state solution. In parallel, Hamas, a terrorist group, controls regions of Gaza and have not given up the fight and have not freed all hostages. Canada is ready to recognize a Palestinian state at a moment that's the most conducive to long-term peace, and not only at the very end of a negotiation process towards a two-state solution. The Honourable Member for Belley-Chambly. International relations doesn't go through this kind of rhetoric, Mr. Speaker. We have to be concrete and we have to be strong. Is the best time to recognise the Palestinian state not now? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, for decades, Canada's position has been eminently clear and continues to be eminently clear. The only solution for peace in the Middle East is to have a safe and recognized Palestinian state next to an Israeli state that is safe and recognized. That's the only way. Our position for a long time has been that this recognition of a Palestinian state needs to come at the end of this process. We today recognize that it's not necessarily at the end of this process that we will recognize the Palestinian state. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Not a chance. That's what the president of the Residential Construction Council said when asked if this prime minister would keep his promise to build 3.9 million homes by 2031. So let's hear it from the prime minister. To reach that target, he'd have to build 550,000 homes per year. So yes or no, will the prime minister hit the target of 550,000 homes this year? Yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, Canada is facing a housing crisis, and we need to take real action towards it, which is what we've done with the most ambitious and achievable plan that this country's ever seen. But, Mr. Speaker, that's not to say we haven't had housing crises before, and it's not to say we haven't solved housing crises before. At the end of World War II, there was a need for massive new housing, and Canada stepped up and got that housing built. Indeed, when the boomers came of age, there was a need for massive housing, and we made investments, and the federal government helped build housing across the country for boomers. We are doing that now as we build housing.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
That was a wonderful history lesson, except it didn't answer the question. He promised he'd lower housing costs in 2015. He doubled them. He promised he'd double home building. It actually went down and is still dropping. But now he's promising 3.9 million brand new homes by 2031. That means he'd have to build 550,000 this year and every year. So once again, will the Prime Minister keep his promise to build 550,000 homes this year? Yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader Opposite speaks of 2015. Well, we took office with a commitment to get this government back, the federal government back in the business of building housing. We launched a national housing strategy in 2017 that put 2.5 million Canadians into new or refurbished homes, and we've continued to invest ever since. We're building homes on public lands. We're converting underused federal offices into homes. We're taxing vacant lands to incentivize construction. We're building apartments, bringing rents down with top-ups to the apartment construction loan program. We're scaling up modular housing. We're launching Canada Builds to lead a Team Canada effort to build more homes and more, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The question was not how quickly he could read off talking points written for him by his staff. The question was whether he's going to break yet another housing promise. Remember, he promised he'd lower housing costs. He doubled them. He promised he'd double the number of homes built. They went down. Now he's promising 3.9 million new homes by 2031. That means 550,000 new homes this and every year. Will he keep that promise? Yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition's criticism is there's too many measures in our housing plan. Housing should be solved by a simple one-size-fits-all solution, according to the Leader of the Opposition. That's perhaps how he managed to build only 6 affordable homes when he was Minister of Housing. Because yes, we have a broad range of initiatives that are delivering on housing, like topping up the Housing Accelerator Fund with $400 million, a new $6 billion Canada Housing Infrastructure Fund to help communities build. We're leveraging transit funding to build more homes. We're launching a housing design catalog. We're incentivizing more skilled trade workers.
The Right Honourable, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He's announcing a catalog, everybody. Your rent is doubled, but hey, you've got a brand new catalog. Mr. Speaker, the question was, will he build 550,000 new homes, yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
He mentioned the history lesson. Well, if he was housing minister, he should have known that the way we solved the housing crisis after World War II was was by putting forward a catalog of homes that builders could access to build extremely rapidly right across the country. So yes, that's one of the measures we're bringing back. And his mockery of concrete initiatives that are going to deliver for Canadians is exactly what's wrong with his approach. He'd rather mock and insult than actually roll up his sleeves and get solutions built for Canadians.
The honourable member from London Fanshawe.
Report after report has shown that women who serve in the Canadian Armed Forces are not safe, and consecutive governments have failed to act urgently. Shamefully, a new report revealed that 5% of women have been sexually attacked at their military colleges in the last 12 months. Justice Arbour was clear. Now is the time to end the toxic culture that exists within these colleges. Women deserve a safe place to train and to learn. When will the Prime Minister act to protect women who are the future generation of the Canadian Armed Forces?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we absolutely agree that the culture at the Royal Military College needs to change. That's why we took action. We appointed the Canadian Military College Review Board last year to enable meaningful culture change at these institutions. No RMC cadet and no CAF member should ever be subject to harassment, discrimination, or misconduct. The Minister of National Defence will not hesitate to implement the necessary changes to protect cadets and all officers.
The honourable member for Rosemount-La Petite Patrie. Mr. Speaker, did you find last summer difficult? We remember the forest fires, the evacuations, the smoke in the sky, the heat waves, but hold on to your hats because the summer of 2023 may well have been the most pleasant for the next 20 years. The summer to come will even be hotter. The number of suffocating days will multiply, as will heat waves and heat domes. The climate crisis is real. Vulnerable populations and seniors are suffering. Will the Prime Minister get it through his head that continuing to support the oil industry is madness? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we will continue with the most ambitious fight against climate change that Canada has ever seen. And we are delivering results. Excluding the pandemic, Canada's emissions have never been as low in 25 years. And we are the first federal government to achieve its emissions targets. It is possible to reduce emissions, to fight climate change, and to support Canadians and grow the economy at the same time. That's what we're going to continue to do to build a stronger, greener future for all Canadians.
The honourable member from Vaughan Woodbridge.
Mr. Speaker, thanks to the work of our government, Ontario is a leading manufacturing hub for the 21st century. Companies from across the world are choosing Ontario to build high-tech factories that are focused on delivering real climate action. The world knows that the economy of tomorrow needs to be built on sustainability because climate change is real. Evidently, the Conservative Party did not get the memo. Can the Prime Minister tell this House more about what the government is doing to make Ontario a global leader in electric vehicle production?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the whole world is embracing an economy based on renewable energy and clean techs. The member for Vaughan Woodbridge is right. Thanks to our bold investments, Ontario is now a global leader in EV production. We have the #1 EV battery supply chain in the world, thanks to investments from companies like Honda, Stellantis, and Volkswagen. These are thousands of good jobs and billions of dollars invested in Ontario that the Conservative Party is opposing for no good reason. Shame on them, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. This morning, a shocking article in La Presse says that children escorted by police to leave daycares because of homeless people and injection sites next to them. I'm quoting the director of the daycare. It's not normal to have to walk through with policemen around a daycare. Why, with the support of the Bloc, is this Prime Minister putting our children in danger by allowing violent repeat offenders take drugs on our streets. The Right Honourable Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, nurses, hospital personnel, and all patients and Canadians should be able to feel safe in their workplaces and in hospitals. This is our government has supported $1 billion in the healthcare system to make sure Canadians have access to the best healthcare possible. The difference between us and the Conservative Party is that while they seek to criminalize those who are most vulnerable, drug addicts, we are rolling up our sleeves and working at all levels of government to resolve this crisis. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Speaker, he didn't hear the question. It was in terms of daycares. Yes, because of the decriminalization in BC, nurses had to breathe in crack and meth fumes. But now I'm talking about Montreal, where his policies led to the liberation of violent criminals and drugs in the streets next to a daycare. Once again, my question, why is the Bloc and the Liberals, why are they not accepting our common sense plan to eliminate drugs and put criminals in prison? The Right Honourable Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, what the Conservative leader is proposing is a step back to policies of the Harper years, which failed in the fight against drug addiction. And even one of the government's Harper advisors recognizes that it was a clear failure. We're going to continue to be here to make sure, assure security for everyone, including for children in daycares, with a compassion-based approach, health-based approach, and keeping people safe. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Many Canadians want to go back to the days when children didn't need police officers at their daycares, Mr. Speaker. But after 9 years, the Bloc Liberal government is not worth the cost. The Bloc voted for $500 billion in inflationary bureaucratic spending and centralizing spending. This has caused 60% of consumers to say that they are in stress. When will the Bloc change its tax and inflationary spending on the backs of Quebecers? The Right Honourable Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leader has just explained that his approach is austerity. Austerity for a government that would make it hard for people. We have chosen to invest to help Canadians. For example, help seniors with dental care. And since the beginning of May, there have been more than 100,000 seniors able to obtain dental care across our country. This is an initiative that helps keep costs down and take care of vulnerable people. And the Conservative Party will continues to vote against it and even tried to block it across the country. This is shameful. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
About austerity, well, I think that the Bransfield family of 4 in Calgary can tell him all about austerity, because that's what they're living right now because of his housing hell, his carbon taxes, and his inflation. They said, close quote, "We're having to choose between paying a bill or getting food, and that can be really hard. It makes things really difficult. And I just don't see an end in sight. Will the Prime Minister accept our common sense plan to axe the tax, fix the budget, build the homes so that the Bransfield family and so many others can eat, heat, and house themselves?"
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I disagree with the Leader of the Opposition who wants to take away the Canada carbon rebate checks that arrive 4 times a year in the bank accounts of the Bransfield families. Indeed, 8 out of 10 Canadians, according to the Parliamentary Budget Officer, are better off with the Canada carbon rebate as we fight climate change with the price on pollution. 8 out of 10 Canadian families from coast to coast in the jurisdictions where the carbon price applies are better off. That includes, most likely, the Bransfield family, and we will continue to be there for them.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. let's not be mistaken. I have the great respect for the state of Israel, but things have to stop. With this in mind, is the Prime Minister ready to support the ICJ and the ICC to adhere to international law and help all peoples who could be subject to arrest on Canadian territory? And is he ready to apply the Canadian sanctions regime to Israelis who openly commit crimes against humanity in the Gaza Strip? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, Canada supports the independent work of the ICJ and the ICC. We are here to support the process and to ensure that everyone follows international law, including the rulings of these courts. We are here to support processes multilaterally to make sure that international law is adhered to. We are a country of rule of law, and we will remain so. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has announced a bunch of principles that seem very interesting, but never seems ready to accept terms and adopt and put forward cooperation with our allies, countries that have political will and policies that will help force Israel to end the violence in Gaza. Can he stop just giving us empty words and take action? We've just sent 10 proposals to do this. The Right Honourable Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, if we want to respect international law and the rule of law, we have to respect the work done by institutions that were created to support it and defend it. And yes, we do support these institutions, but we're not going to jump stages to declare an outcome or decisions of these courts. On the contrary, we are going to wait for them to do their work, because this is what international law hinges on.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
After 9 years, the Bloc Liberals aren't worth the cost. The Bloc has not only voted for $500 billion in appropriations that are centralizing, bureaucratic and inflationary, but they want to radically increase taxes on gas and diesel for Quebecers in the regions. Unlike the Conservatives, who want to cut taxes, we are proposing to give a tax vacation for Quebecers on gas and diesel. Will the Prime Minister accept my common sense plan to reduce gas by 10 cents a litre for this summer? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. The Conservative leader has a problem. His messages don't reach Quebec. Quebecers don't want to hear his ideas taking a step back in the fight against climate change. It's something that Quebecers understand very well. So his solutions are attacking the Bloc or Quebec members or Quebecers themselves to try to take steps back in the fight against climate change. It will fail because the Conservative leader does not understand Quebecers and does not understand, in fact, most Canadians that know that climate change is real and we need to tackle it. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Speaker. When Conservatives were in power, the Bloc was almost eliminated because we reduced government and allowed Quebec to have autonomy. Quebecers were in charge of their destiny, but they have centralizing powers and policies, and that is why these two parties are cooperating together. Will he finally accept to unite the country with a federal government that is smaller, so we can have Quebec and Quebecers that are stronger? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, if he knew history, he'd know that the Bloc has existed because of the Conservative Party. But let's put this aside, Mr. Speaker, to underscore the reality that we'll always be here to defend Quebecers. We'll always be here to work. Order, please.
Hey,
I would ask the member for Marc Aurèle Fortin. Sorry. No, not that member. I would ask the member to continue their discussions behind the curtains, please. I will ask the Prime Minister to start again from the top. Mr. Speaker, we've just seen, finally, after months, the Conservative caucus in Quebec wake up and finally talk. The reality is that when we talk about the environment, the Conservatives in Quebec say nothing. When we talk about the rights of women, the Quebec Conservatives say nothing. And we have seen shameful behavior from the Conservative caucus in Quebec, from the Conservatives, because they refuse to stand up for Quebec values. They tackle other Quebec members. This is shameful. They should apologize to all Quebecers. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, he has just gone off the rails. He's lost control. He is so angry. Why? Because he has just learned that Quebec Liberals are turning their backs on him. Why? Because he has there's a common sense Conservative team that will cut taxes, build homes, fix the budget, and stop crime. Why not accept this? There's still time to accept this common sense plan. Give people a tax break so Quebecers can have a tax-free vacation. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. True, Mr. Speaker, sometimes I do stand up as a Quebecer to defend the values of my nation, of my country. These values as a Quebecer and a proud Canadian. We want to defend the environment, tackle climate change, protect the rights of women. Yes, I will always be passionate when it's time to defend fundamental rights for Canadians. I'm here to do this. Unfortunately, the Conservative Party continues to propose Quebecers a step back, and in terms of climate change, they're denying it. They're taking a step back in terms of the rights of women. That's not what Canadians and other Quebecers want. I'd like to apologize to the member of Marc Aurèle Fortin. It wasn't the honourable member. Mr. Speaker, this government knows that climate change isn't just necessary for the future of the planet. It's also how Canada stays competitive. Last year, $2.4 trillion was invested in creating our net zero economy. Can the Prime Minister highlight some of the steps the government is taking to attract clean investment to Canada? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for his question. The reason the world is adopting a greener economy, well, because Canada remains competitive, because we're investing billions in clean tech, and our plan's already working. Companies are building new factories and are creating thousands of well-paying jobs in Quebec and across the country. The Conservative leader doesn't have a climate plan and therefore has no economic plan. While him and the Conservative caucus try to bring Canada back to the Stone Age, we're remaining focused on a stronger, greener economy for all generations. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Plan to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. But of course, the NDP is keeping this costly Prime Minister in office for another year and a half while people starve and are forced to live in tents. Those Canadians who've been able to hold on to their homes, They can't afford a vacation, but maybe a staycation. So we're asking today that the Prime Minister vote for a motion we will introduce tomorrow, which will give Canadians a 35-cent a litre gas tax break until Labor Day. Will the Prime Minister axe the taxes so Canadians can have a staycation?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative Party is proposing to eliminate the Canada carbon rebate. This is a rebate that arrives 4 times a year in the pockets of Canadian families that, according to experts, economists, and the Parliamentary Budget Officer, puts more money in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadian families in the jurisdictions in which it applies. This is more money in people's pockets while we fight climate change with the most effective plan against climate change Canada has ever seen. This is what the Conservative leader continues to rally against: affordability and climate fight.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Of course, the Prime Minister is doing neither. After 9 years, the NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the cost, and neither is his carbon tax, which the Parliamentary Budget Officer finds costs more to 60% of Canadians than they get back in phony rebates. Mr. Speaker, going into the summer, the Prime Minister plans to hike taxes again. Canadians need a break now more than ever. Can he put aside his wacko ideology long enough to give Canadians a break by axing all the taxes on fuel for summer vacation?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it's not ideology to understand that fighting climate change and growing the economy while putting money in people's pockets is a good thing, because that's exactly what this government has done. Excluding the pandemic, our emissions are now the lowest they've been in 25 years because of our plan that prices pollution and puts more money back in the pockets out of 8 of 10 Canadian families. The fact that he refuses to understand that you don't have a plan for the economy if you don't have a plan to fight climate change is yet another proof of the fact that his approach is not going to succeed for Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, he ranks 62nd out of 67 countries on fighting climate change. This after he's brought in a 17-cent a litre carbon tax, a tax that he wants to nearly quadruple up to 61 cents a litre if, God forbid, he's ever elected. We have 2 million people lined up at food banks, a quarter of Canadians skipping meals because they can't afford food. 1 in 4 adults missing meals so they can feed their kids. For God's sakes, why won't he give Canadians a summer vacation from all his taxes and accept our common sense plan?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
The Conservative leader isn't focused on affordability. He's focused on ending action on climate change. If he was so concerned about the price of gas, he'd have a conversation with his friend, the Premier of Alberta, who just raised the gas tax by 13 cents a litre. Experts agree, including Premier Smith, that Canadians receive back more money from the Canada carbon rebate than they pay with the price on pollution. We are putting a price on pollution and putting more money back in the pockets of the middle class and people working hard to join it. That is joining the efforts we're doing on affordability, like dental care, like support for childcare, and support the middle class.
The Honourable Member for St. John's East.
Our Atlantic Accords bill will allow for the development of offshore wind projects. By investing in renewable energy, we are investing in a future for Atlantic Canadians that is green and prosperous, one where we fight climate change and create jobs. The Conservatives are getting in the way of Atlantic Canada by opposing C-49. What is government doing to ensure that Atlantic Canada can contribute to the green economy?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I thank the member for St. John's East for her advocacy on behalf of all Atlantic Canadians. We're equipping Atlantic Canadians with the tools they need to thrive in the economy of tomorrow. Offshore wind alone is expected to bring $1 trillion of investment by 2040. There's no common sense in opposing good-paying, cutting-edge Atlantic Canadian jobs. This is yet another example of the Conservatives blocking middle-class jobs because of their backwards ideology. While Conservatives Conservative politicians pen angry op-eds against investing in the Atlantic, we'll ensure Atlantic Canadians are not left behind.
The honourable member from Churchill-Kiwatinuk-Aski.
Mr. Speaker, here in northern Manitoba, we've seen the wildfire season start much earlier because of climate change. Frontline forest firefighters are giving it their all, but they can't do it alone. The military has had to help with firefighting operations across the country in the past. But now military leadership is warning their capacity to help Canadians evacuate will be limited, calling that help wickedly wasteful. Let's be clear, we are facing a climate emergency. So if these domestic operations aren't a priority for our military, then what is? Can Canadians count on this government to call in the military when we need help?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I am certain the member opposite did not mean to disparage the extraordinary women and men of the Canadian Armed Forces who continue to step up and show up for Canadians, as they did all through last summer, as they will through this summer, where and when needed. But we also recognize that wildfires are getting worse, that the impacts of climate change are having more and more impacts on floods, droughts, and wildfires. And we will continue to need to be there with the military, but also call on more resources from civil society and elsewhere to support in these times of emergency.
The honourable member for Richmond-Arthabaska. Mr. Speaker, we have learned very bad news in my riding this year. For many years, we've had a Canada Day party in Victoriaville involving many municipalities, but for a reason we don't know, the Minister of Canadian Heritage doesn't seem to be giving any funds to the Canada Day party organization, despite the fact that there's members of the business community involved and many others. On July 1st, there'll be no Canada Day party. What does the Prime Minister think of this? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I am troubled by this information, and I will certainly follow up to see what we can do, because Canadians across this country should be able to celebrate our national holiday with all the festivities that we'll see in our communities. And I appreciate enormously that the member has brought this concern to my attention, and we will follow up with his office. This is the end of the question.
All right, everybody, that is it. You can help support the channel by giving thanks or super chat or whatnot. We will see you tomorrow for the next question period. Have a wonderful evening.